Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW repairs and information. I've got a really interesting one for you today. A really annoying problem with the old BMWs, and I think it affects new ones as well, that took about 2 years to solve. And there was a simple solution to it in the end, but I'll let Tim explain what the problem is. So this is exactly where you'd find the problem. You're in drive after coming off the A road or the motorway, and you're into a 50 or 60 mile an hour limit. And the first thing you notice, especially between 40 and 50, is you get a drone. And then the next thing you notice is the RPMs keep changing, only very slightly, 100 or 200 RPM. But you can notice it on the tachometer. The needle just moves slightly and then back up again, and then down, and then up. And it does it continuously until you go a bit faster or you put your foot down. If you put your foot down, the problem goes away entirely. Or if you put it into sports mode, or fourth if you got to the non-steptronic, just plop it down into fourth gear, you don't get that problem anymore. It just goes away. Now, the really annoying part of this problem was the drone, especially as you'd been on an A road, come onto a smaller road and gone to a bit between somewhere like 40 and 60 miles an hour. I think it's more prominent down at 50 miles an hour. And the drone would come and go as well. It sort of go like, oh God, the drone's back. And then it'd go up about a semitone. And the revs would go up at 100 or 200 RPM, and the drone had gone again. Think, oh, thank goodness for that. And then semitone down and back to droning again. It really was annoying. So why am I bringing up this problem now when my 740 had the problem probably 15 or 20 years ago? Well, it's because of posts on bimmerforums.com, in this case on the E31 section. Bloke with an 850 has got exactly the same problem with cycling revs and so on. And he's changed a lot of things, including head gaskets and all sorts. It's exactly the same for me with a 740. I changed all sorts of things. I changed the thermostat to start with because it's running too cold anyway. Did that fix it? No, it made it a lot worse. Yeah, and the reason for that will become obvious a bit later in the story. And then I changed the MAF. It was a Chinese one anyway. It was absolutely useless. Plugs, coil over plug units, all sorts of things like that. Old manifold, make sure that's all sealed up and stuff like that. Didn't make a slightest bit of difference. Well, we've blurbed on for quite a time about what the symptoms are. What's the problem then? Is it something with the engine? Wheels maybe that's causing this change in revs? Well, it sounds more like something with the engine, doesn't it? So you would go changing all sorts of engine bits, trying to find out. Diagnostics, yeah, you're not going to find any problem there at all. So what is the problem? Well, it's not the engine, it's the torque converter in the gearbox. And I'll explain why. Okie doke, so what's exactly going on here then? Well, first of all, remember that the tachometer actually shows a change in RPM as the drone comes and goes. And you can see it just about on the tachometer. Difficult to notice, but it goes up and down a bit. It goes up and the drone goes away, goes down, the drone comes back again. It does it every couple of seconds, maybe faster. So exactly what's going on here? Now, the problem occurs when your ATF in your gearbox hasn't been changed for a number of years. And what happens to the ATF is it slowly becomes less viscous. So for a given RPM of the ATF pump, which is part of the gearbox, it cannot provide enough energy to do the jobs it's meant to. I sort of lock up the clutches in the gearbox, the brake bands and things like that. And one of them is the torque converter lockup clutch. And what's actually happening is when you've come off a motorway and the engine and gearbox have reached temperature, because it doesn't do this first thing in the morning, by the way, it only does it when the engine and gearbox is hot. The ATF is less viscous because it's hot. And then at a certain RPM, when you're in drive and the ZFHP 30 and 24 and all the rest of them loves to put it in fifth gear as soon as possible for economic reasons. It wants to increase the fuel economy as much as it can, so it just stuffs it in fifth gear while you're doing 40. So no thought about performance or anything like that. No, get that into fifth and then lock up the lockup clutch. Yeah, that's what we want to do. Yeah, and that's where the problem occurs. Now, when you're doing about 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, you're only doing about somewhere between 1500 and 1800 RPM. It's quite a low revs. Now, let's have a quick look at the torque converter. In this case, we're idling, we've got a foot on the brake, it's in drive. So the impeller's turning, but the turbine is staying still. That's pretty obvious from this diagram. Now, our problem occurs when we're cruising, probably between 40, 50, maybe up to 60, but I think that was unusual, around those speeds. Now, of course, the torque converter isn't 100% efficient. Without any other external means, when you're cruising, the impeller will be turning faster than the turbine. So here's the diagram, and it shows the impeller driven by the engines going faster than the turbine, which is connected to the input of the gearbox. So it's inefficient, and it's about a 10% difference between input and output. That 10% of energy is radiated from the torque converter as heat, which is why they get pretty hot when you're going flat out and so on. To avert that problem of this slip, if you like, between impeller and turbine, there's a torque converter lockup clutch, and it locks the two together right at the front of the torque converter. But for our purposes, we just say it clamps the impeller to the turbine. And in this diagram, you can see they're both going exactly the same speed. That's what a torque converter lockup clutch does, and it does it well. In the ZF gearboxes, it does it on the later models, does it in third, fourth and fifth gear, but the one we're interested is in fifth gear. Now, remember that I said it's the engine that drives the ATF pump, and that's very important. So off you go. You've done a bit of driving down a motorway, a highway, a good fast A road, and you come onto a slower road between 40, 50, 55, somewhere around that. And then what BMW's software does is immediately stick you in fifth gear for economy, and then it locks up the lockup clutch. So it's being 100% efficient. Now, the problem is, if you've got ATF in that gearbox, you know, your filled for life or lifetime oil, whatever they want to call it, if you haven't actually changed it, then your ATF has lost a lot of its viscosity. It's quite thin, it's a bit like petrol now. And the problem is, for a given RPM of the ATF pump, cannot provide enough pressure to lock up the clutch. And what happens is, when you're going quite slowly, remember the engine's going faster than the turbine, so the impeller's going faster than the turbine, which means the ATF pump is going at engine speed. When the torque converter lockup clutch locks up, the first thing that happens is the RPMs drop, and that's what you notice. Problem with that is the fact that the RPMs dropped, the ATF speed has dropped, it cannot provide enough energy to lock up that lockup clutch. So it just lets go and opens again. And of course the revs rise, and then the ATF pump can provide enough pressure to lock the lockup clutch, and it goes round in this circle every 2 seconds or so. And so that's what causes the droning, is the chatter of the lockup clutch. Some people say it's cavitation in the turbine. It could be, I'm no expert on this, but you can be sure that the problem is that the lockup clutch is not engaging properly. And I believe the rumble and the drone comes from that. Okay, so now we know that it's a problem with ATF viscosity, which is at the heart of the problem. What can we do about it? Well, the obvious one, of course, is to change the ATF. But of course, as we know on the ZF gearboxes, that's a bit of a pain in the neck, to be honest. Well, once you know that it's a torque converter lockup clutch which is the problem, is you change the fluid and the filter, which is exactly what I did. It made it a lot better, but it wasn't great. And I think I did 30,000 miles with it, getting worse and worse, to the point where the drone was back again and so on. So there is a simpler fix to this, and it's one which I eventually used on my E38 to great success. I couldn't believe it actually worked. And that's a friction modifier. And it's something called Dr. Tranny's Judder fix. Yes, it really is. Comes in little red sort of sachet things. And it isn't too hard to fit in there because, of course, on a cold engine and gearbox, you start the engine, put it through all the gears, and then you can remove the fill plug and put the stuff in there. Now, on certain gearboxes of the ZF variety, there is a fill plug, and in other ones, the fill plug's actually at the bottom of the pan, and you undo it from underneath, and you may get a little bit of fluid. And so the one on the side, you can squirt in the little sachets, 2 of them I'd recommend. And the other one, you have to put in a squeezy bottle with a straw, and you can squirt it in and then put the bolt back up. Now, the problem is, if you've had this sort of drone and change of RPM for a long time, what actually happens to the torque converter lockup clutch is it wears out, and then your drone goes away and you think, oh, it's all fixed itself. Yeah, well, your torque converter lockup clutch doesn't work anymore. And the first thing you notice is when you're cruising along in 5th gear, the 80 miles an hour, you put your foot down and the revs go up immediately. Just a tiny touch of the throttle and the revs are going up. And that's because the lockup clutch has now lost its friction material and just isn't working. So you can change your ATF and stick Dr. Tranny's Judder fix in there. You're not going to get the drone and the change in RPMs anymore, but you're not going to get the economy either. You left it too late. Very glad to say on my E38 with 5 HP, 24 on that, could have been 30, I can't remember. It got rid of the problem altogether. It was a revelation. I couldn't believe that it worked, but it does. It's absolutely amazing feeling that in the positions where I'd normally have the problem, which is actually on this part of this road, going the other way, last thing at night, come off the motorway or the A3, drive, 5th gear, drone gone, no change in revs anymore. Absolutely like a miracle it was. It really was. But as I say, I've driven all the cars with Steptronic from that point on anyway. Much prefer it. It's got a bit more control coming up to roundabouts and stuff like that. It's much better to stick it into 2nd gear. Got all the power there. You're not going to change gear halfway round the roundabout or anything like that, which is always a pain in the neck. Off we go. Oh, lovely E31. But I do miss the E38. So much more torque from them with the Vanos engines. The M62B, rather than the M62 tub, has much power but just not quite enough torque. It's just, as long as you drive it in the way you need to drive the E31 with the M62 instead of the M62 tub, got to keep the revs up. That's the important thing. Anything over 3,000, it's absolutely perfect. Same power as the tub engine. So 3,000 RPM. Oh my goodness. Oh, love it. It's just so much fun. That's good fun, that is. But yeah, that fixed it. And yeah, it fixed it pretty good. And as far as I know, it still fixed. My lovely E38 individual is now in New Zealand, being looked after over there. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting one. And if you've got the Judder and the drone and the change in revs, yeah, change your ATF straight away. And you might as well put some Dr. Tranny's Judder fix in there at the same time, and that will probably fix the problem. And if it doesn't, well, new torque converter, I'm afraid, but there you go, you left it too long. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Put the thumbs up if you enjoyed that. Keep commenting, love the comments as I always say, and I'll see you in the next one.